last week.
The Filipinos cannot wait. We have to bring down the cost of electricity, the cost of power, the cost of oil. We have to bring in developmental projects, not just infrastructure, but we have to bring agricultural projects in. We have to make sure that there's food security.
President Bongbong Marcos says the government is working to customize the bill to ensure that it would suit the country's needs.
We have to design it very specifically to the Philippine condition. And that's what the legislators are trying to do now, to make sure na babagay para sa atin, and it will be a good thing for us. So that's the process that we're undergoing now.
Senate President Mig Zubiri sees the passage of the Maharlika Investment Fund after the Holy Week break. But some senators are raising their concerns. Will the controversial wealth fund breeze through the upper chamber the same way it did at the House of Representatives? We discuss in this episode of The Chiefs. Welcome to the Chiefs. I'm Lucy Cruz Valdez, and joining me tonight is Ami Pamintuan, Editor-in-Chief of the Philippine Star. Ami, tayo lang, no voice.
Oo nga, happy Monday.
Except the guests. Happy Monday. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Naka-New Year mode ka pa eh.
Happy New Year. Oo nga pala, Happy New Year. Happy Year of the Rabbit. Ayan,
Yes.
maganda pasok ng taon ha. Bumaba daw.
Talaga?
Po naman, bumaba na ang presyo ng sibuyas. So palengke nyo, ewan ko magkano na.
Parang ano daw 250 pero hindi pa raw below 200 kasi yun
Hindi
ang
pa.
inaantay ng tao, di ba? Na bumaba sa, ano ba yan, pre-250 level or pre-200, di ba?
200.
Kasi dati, ano lang yun eh, magkano ba yan before nagka-problema rito?
Mababa
Parang
yan
nasa
ng
170, 150, 80 pa nga original,
Baba yan
di
ng
ba?
80 to 120.
Yeah.
Pero nagdatingan na kasi yung mga imported onions from China.
Right.
Kaya yung
Oo.
stick nyo pwede na uli, meron ng yellow onion.
Oo, lumalabas na. Pero may bago ngayon yung ginagaya. Parang strips. Kung anong ginagawa ngayon ng mga tindero. Yun ang tinitinda. Ganun ba? Siguro yun yung mga lumang sibuyas
Oo.
na ginayat-gayat nila para na lang magmukhang bago.
Pangit
Oo.
nga. Isa yan sa mga bawas sa problema ni President Marcos. Sabi niya, yung inflation daw also keeps him awake at night. Talagang kulang na sa tulog tong presidente natin.
Oo nga eh. Well, pero nag-promise din siya na hindi na siya babiyahe masyado for the rest of the year.
Dalawa na lang daw. Dalawa na lang. Isa na lang, Japan, which is already
Yes.
in a few days, in a few weeks.
Saka
yun na lang
probably the
US.
United States. No?
US for the
Yan lang.
APEC, ang tagal-tagal
Right.
na November.
Yeah. Oo.
So, kasuhin niya siguro yung mga presyo
Yes.
natin.
At saka parang parang tinanong siya dun sa interview with the network anchors kung kailan daw siya magtatalaga ng Secretary for Agriculture.
Yes.
Sabi niya may inaantay lang daw siyang timing. Ano kayang inaantay, no? Hindi niya sinabi kung ano yun pero meron daw siyang inaantay.
Oo nga, late last year pa, di ba? Sinasabi na yan may mga ganyan ang usapan na he is planning nga to appoint soon.
Yes.
Secretary of Agriculture nga. So, ewan ko kung ano. Baka naman 6 months pa uli, ewan ko.
Right.
One
tsaka-
of the candidates, no?
Oo. Yeah, antayin natin yan. And antayin din natin yung pag-uusapan na sa Senate ang Maharlika Fund.
Oo, nag-file na ng counterpart si Senator Mark Villar. So,
That's right.
Yan ang ating...
At yan ang ating topic ngayon. And we will be speaking to our first guest after a short breather. Stay with the Chiefs. Welcome back to the Chiefs. And joining us tonight is Senator Sherwin Gatchalian. And our topics, dalawa ito, Maharlika Investment Fund and POGOs. Kanina nag-hearing on POGOs, but before we discuss the POGOs, the issue there, we would like to talk to you about the Maharlika Investment Fund, especially because now Senator Mark Villar is set to actually formally file the bill. Nakafile na pero hindi pa niya dinidiscuss Senado. But Senate President Zubiri has already said, sir, na by Holy Week, baka labas na ito. Are you confident also that just because the sheer numbers, this is going to pass muster?
Well, Ami Luci, my own take on this, the sovereign wealth fund concept is nothing out of the extraordinary. A lot of countries have this. I also looked at, did my own research, and even some of the African countries have this. So the concept itself is nothing new. However, the crux of the issue here is where do we get the funds? And if we ever have the funds, is it enough to generate the kind of return that is worth the creation of the fund? So this is the issue that I will be looking at, and this is actually the point that I will be looking at. And it's important also that the fund that we will raise is enough to generate returns and enough to generate the development projects that this is envisioned to create.
Well, Senator, offhand though, I'm sure you've seen the House version, no? And in the House version, there's 50 billion coming from the Land Bank and another, I think, 20 billion, if I'm not mistaken. 50 billion from, Land Bank, and then 20 billion from the Development Bank. And then yung mga dividends daw from the BSP, no? Sa tansya nyo ba, in your estimation, would this be enough as a fund starter, kumbaga, to bankroll all the other projects that they intend to invest in?
Actually, Luci, the concept has been constantly evolving. I heard that the most recent version is only from dividends from GOCCs, excluding the GFIs, the bank. So, so it's constantly evolving. I think the evolution stems from public opinion as well as the new ideas that are coming out.
Yes.
But if we're talking about number one, from the GOCCs, dividends from the GOCCs, typically the dividends form part of the General Appropriations Act. And the General Appropriations Act is the law that we use to implement schools, roads, and social projects. So meaning if we take out the dividends from the General Appropriations Act, obviously we'll also reduce the size of the GAA. So that might hamper some important projects within the GAA. However, if you look at if you look at the size, $1 billion is actually not so big compared to, let's say, the other sovereign wealth funds. $1 billion is about 55 billion pesos. If you look at our budget itself, our GAA budget is about 5 trillion pesos already. So in terms of size, it's not as big as compared to the other sovereign wealth funds. So, but then again, my point here is I want to look at the returns. I want to look at the objectives, of course, the source of funds.
Senator, nag-i-evolve nga to, no? Sinabi na ni Albay Congressman Salceda na drop na daw yung BSP and DBP. Pero mukhang yung sa final ni Senator Mark Villar, andun pa rin eh.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, kahit si President Marcos, nag-i-evolve din yung idea niya about the fund, ano? Parang sinasabi niya, ayaw niyang mag-rely masyado sa government funding eh.
Yeah.
Ang sinabi niya today, in fact, mas gusto niya private sector. So what can you say about that?
In fact,
viable ba yun?
Yeah, in fact, before the BSP was included, the pension funds were included. and now all of those are gone, and only dividends from GOCCs remain. So the dividends from GOCCs, not again. I heard if you add it up, it's about 50 billion pesos, which is not big in comparison vis-a-vis other sovereign wealth funds. No, so. Definitely, again, no, the concept is nothing new. The concept has been there for decades. It's just we have to make sure that it's worth the time and worth the setup, because setting is, if you have a sovereign wealth fund and you have fund managers, you have a management staff, they will manage. It's the same effort and the same people who will manage a $1 billion fund and a $100 billion fund. No? So my point there is economies of scale is also very important when you talk about sovereign wealth funds.
Pero yung sovereign wealth, it's really more of reserves, di ba? Of a country.
Surplus.
Parang surplus siya. Pero ang lumalabas niyan, we will be depending more on the private sector. And especially from investors outside. You think that's a viable proposition? Considering the environment ngayon, people are warning of a global recession, di ba? And given the conditions in our country, you think that's a viable proposition?
Well, number one, if you rely on private investors, it's not sovereign wealth. That's the wealth of other people.
Kaya nga eh.
You can't call it sovereign wealth funds if the wealth comes from other people.
Yes.
The original concept of sovereign wealth funds is you invest, you use your resources or proceeds from the resources now in order to benefit future generations. And typically, it's born out of proceeds from oil and gas, from natural resources, because the concept here is we're using natural resources now, and the future generations will be deprived of that same natural resource. So to spread out evenly the benefits from that natural resource, you invest it in a sovereign wealth fund. And then the benefits out of that sovereign wealth funds can be accrued to the next generation and then generation after. That's the concept Norway has taken, because Norway is a huge oil and gas producer. But the Norwegians are saying, what about the next generation? We're not going to enjoy the same oil and gas resource in the next few centuries. So they invested the proceeds from that so that the next generation can enjoy the benefits of the current resource.
Eh, yun nga sinasabi, wala naman tayong ganyan dito. Paubos na nga yung malampaya.
Yeah.
We
Dapat
have
dati pa
nothing of that sort here, no? So, why are we even thinking about a sovereign wealth fund? Of course, ang dami na napag-usapan nga rito at nag-evolve na. And Senator, my question to you is this. What will make you, put your stamp on it when it comes to voting in the Senate?
Well,
if you will put your stamp on it, that is.
Two things that comes to my mind, at least for now, is number one, where will the fund come from? And then the size of the fund, as well as the objectives of the fund. If you talk about, let's say, development, for example, we need to build toll roads, we need to build airports. So you use the sovereign wealth funds to invest in this infrastructure, but we have to make sure that the infrastructure also makes money, so that you will have recurring income for the sovereign wealth fund. So I think that can be a viable option. But then again, if we talk about 50 billion to build infrastructure, that's not so big. If you talk about the subway, we're talking about 500 billion pesos to build a subway. So it's not sizable. So all of these things need to be discussed. And I remain open to the idea, but these issues should be discussed thoroughly.
So you're going to bring it to a talk about where the money will be invested in, anong project yan, and what the ROIs will be in case before you actually make a decision on it. So it's not enough that they just say, kasi sinasabi nila ngayon, Senator, infrastructure, power, yan ang mga nila, di ba? For you, you want to be a little, do you want to be a little more detailed about where the money is going to be invested before you say, okay, approve yan? But do you think that discussions will actually go that far?
Yes, definitely. That should be discussed, no? Because right now, like for example, power is in the hands of the private sector right now, but we need to expand our transmission lines. And there's an argument that can be made that through a sovereign wealth fund, the expansion of transmission lines can be hastened, can be made faster because you have capital already ready. But the same transmission line actually makes money. So the same fund can actually earn from that transmission line. So that's a case that we can make to justify a setup of a sovereign wealth fund. But then again, transmission line, 50 billion is not this small. No, if you compare it to a transmission line, you need a few hundred billions to make it worth its to make it worth it to build a transmission line. So, but that's just an example. So, but again, we need to look at the objectives. Is it cheaper to build infrastructure through the GAA? Is it much more efficient if you do it through a sovereign wealth fund? We need to look at all these models and debate about it.
Well, the president himself is putting on the brakes. No, kanina sabi niya during his press interview, he prefers daw na this is done right. At ayaw na daw niyang hasty. Well, hindi na transmit yun sa House, ano? Pero sa Senate, kaya anong pag-asa kaya niyan? Yung timetable, do you see it being approved? Obviously, it won't be approved in 17 days, ano? Ano kayang timetable for discussions?
Well, we have 2 months, Ami, before the next break, right, which is Holy Week. But we have a lot of things on the table. So, and we're only 24. No? So, I think yung 2 months will be best efforts yan. But then again, because of its high interest, a lot of the senators will study this very carefully.
You think ang magiging sentimiento in the Senate will be similar to the House? Na it will be a super majority opinion o kanya-kanya yan?
Luchi, you've seen the Senate, no? It's a lot. The senators actually think independently of each other. We cross party lines. In fact, sometimes parties don't matter in the Senate, no? So I've seen how the Senate works, and I've seen how the senators work, and most likely the debates will be independent of each other.
Do you actually see a scenario where it's very possible that the Senate will not pass such a bill?
Well, since this is apparently, from my information, this is certified as urgent by Malacanang. So definitely there's a sense of urgency in this bill and importance. And so it will be tackled soon, and because of its importance, it will be given priority. It will really depend on the issues and the complications that will be raised during the debates and discussions. But it will be interesting. I think to be honest about it, when I was a chairman of the Economic Affairs Committee in the 17th Congress, I remember there's a bill filed of the same nature, to establish a sovereign wealth fund during that time. Yes. That's 2016. Right. When I was looking at it, my first instinct is, where do we get the money? Because I know the budgetary process very well. That's why when I was a chairman, it was not in my priority list. So, but then again, it's been there for a while. Maybe the conditions now have changed. Those are the things that we will be looking at.
Well, now that you bring it up, may I ask you, because many people are saying na buti nga ginawa na lang to noong 2016 when, well, ang sinasabi nila, at least maganda pa ang economic conditions natin noon. This was before the pandemic, But do you think then, if it had been actually passed at naitayo yan, would it have worked then? Was that a better time than now to put up a sovereign fund?
Well, even though we underwent a pandemic, Luchi, our growth except for 1 year, no, our growth had been steady around 6 to 7%. So meaning 2016 and 2023 is much different in terms of economic size and as well as budget also. It's very difficult to compare 2016 and 2023 because in terms of economic size, we're much bigger right now. No? So, but then again, at least in my personal view, during that time when I was the chairman of the Economic Affairs Committee, and I was looking at where to get them, because my first instinct is where do we get the money?
Yeah.
So we were running some numbers, we were looking for options, and we said, I think this is not practical at that time. No? That's my personal analysis. I might be wrong, and feel free to debate with me. But during that time, I felt like it's not priority. No.
Senator, our time is limited, no? Oh, can I zoom out and shift to another topic? Another pressing issue, yung POGOs. Sabi ni President Marcos, he wants a reason to be presented to him to ban POGOs altogether. Are you prepared to present that at this point?
Yes, we're ready to submit to the body, to the Senate, our committee report. We conducted 4 hearings on the benefits and cost of POGO. The Ways and Means Committee, which I chair, was tasked to do that because of the most latest law, RA 11590, that was enacted last year. And this law basically governs the taxation regime over POGOs. And my goal is to look at the benefits and the cost. Now, cost being the crime related to POGOs. And this is well established. I think everyone knows what are the crimes related to POGO, and that's well established by the PNP. So we looked at all the data. We looked at all the arguments. We looked at the operations, and also what are the options to this industry. And we're ready to present to the Senate, to the committee, our findings. And I think the findings, the President will find the findings of the committee are as good, very solid arguments, very solid findings in order for him also to decide later on when the Senate makes its recommendation.
Well, I want
Senator, baka bigyan nyo kami ng...
Principal points lang, Senator.
ng findings ninyo. I think the basic question is this. Are they worth keeping?
I don't want to jump ahead of the cart, Lucy, but definitely the bottom line, I'll just give you an idea. Based on our analysis, our economy will not collapse if POGO will be banned in our country. So the fear of losing a big chunk of revenue, a big chunk of our economy is not there. No, our economy is quite resilient. Our economy is quite big over the years, and banning POGOs will not affect us. In fact, we will not feel it when we ban POGOs.
What about the point raised by the President na hindi naman daw lahat ng POGOs lawbreakers. Meron naman daw nagko-comply and paying their taxes.
We also found out, Ami, that a lot of POGOs that are registered with PAGCOR. In fact, this morning lang, when we conducted the hearing, we found out that 2 service providers, which is essentially POGO-related businesses, that are duly licensed and duly registered to with PAGCOR, were embroiled in kidnapping cases. And so it goes to show that despite being accredited and registered with PAGCOR, they are also connected to criminal activities. So, and that's only 2. And then we can name a few more, connected to money laundering, connected to kidnapping. So it's very difficult to say that if you're registered with PAGCOR, you're legal and therefore you're not, you cannot be, it's impossible for you to be connected to criminal activities.
Senator, give us a situationer, financial situationer of exactly how much POGOs are contributing.
Okay.
Kasi I remember in one budget hearing, they were boasting that their projection could reach as high as 10 billion, no?
Yeah.
From the former 8 billion, I think, before the pandemic. Is that big? How would you contextualize that figure?
Just to give you an idea, Luchi, in 2022, by third quarter, Pogo paid about 7.2 billion in taxes. They'll probably end around 8 billion to 8.5 billion in taxes. Just to give you an idea, the projections of DOF when we were discussing the law is about 35 billion in taxes. So you can see that it's way off mark.
Laki ng shortfall.
Yeah, based on the projection. But it can be argued that the pandemic also created a lot of damage. But nevertheless, it can be also argued that China has made it very difficult for POGO employees and POGO operators to operate. In fact, based on our research, China enacted a law that if you are caught working in POGOs or investing in POGOs, you'll be charged with criminal offenses. So in other words, China is making it very difficult for their own citizens to bet and to work with POGO. So that's why, because of those two reasons, the income or the taxes derived from POGOs is really off mark compared to the projection of DOF. The projection of DOF is 35. We'll probably end around 8 billion by end of the year. And if you look at 8 billion compared to our overall economy, that's about 0.05% of our overall economy. So it's very small, no? And that's why when I say that even though they leave, it will not damage our economy. In fact, it can be argued that if POGOs leave and there will be stability in peace and order, more tourists will come, more investments will come, and those revenues that were subtracted from POGO or that were out of POGO can be replaced by much more concrete investments.
Senator, pahabol ko lang, you also mentioned you would be presenting alternatives to POGOs. Baka pwede rin mag-sneak preview.
Yeah, well, I mean, the first alternative is alternative employment to our kababayans working in POGO. There are still 16,000 Pinoys working in POGO. That's half of the manpower right now working in POGO. But just give you an idea, during the height, 2019 was the heyday of POGO. They employed about close to 120,000. Out of the 120,000, only 20,000 there were Pinoys. The 100,000 were foreigners. Marami pa dyan undeclared. No? So my point there is, even during the height of POGO, job generation is not to its maximum. The only job generation that we are creating is for foreigners, not for our own people. So that's why the alternative, the most important aspect that we looked at during the hearing is how to help the 16,000 Pinoys working in the POGO sector right now.
Last question na lang. Is there a template? Are POGOs in operation in other parts of Asia, for example? Which is a model by which we can probably follow.
That's a very good.
In our own POGO operation. I just wonder, di ba?
Galing ng question na yan. That's a very, very good question, important question. There's no model. In fact, because POGO is outlawed in China, many countries don't want POGOs operating in their own jurisdictions. It's like isabong. Imagine if China allowed isabong in their jurisdiction and their customers are from the Philippines. We'll raise hell also against China because they're allowing our citizens to bet on isabong.
Right.
So it's the same manner as we're allowing Chinese citizens to bet here in the Philippines, despite being outlawed in China. So a lot of jurisdictions recognize that, and They don't want to harbor illegal activities in their country. For example, Singapore or Malaysia. These are advanced countries, and they don't want to be perceived as harboring illegal businesses in their jurisdictions.
Well, okay. Thank you very much. That's Senator Sherwin Gatchalian.
Thank you. Thank
Chairman
you,
of
Lucy,
the
Emmy.
Reason.
Thank you,
Yes,
Senator.
thank you, Senator. We'll see you again sometime soon. And we're starting up another conversation after this break. Don't go away. The Chiefs will be right back.
The Commission on Elections has so far logged over 1 million voter registrations, months ahead of the Barangay and Sangguniang Kabataan elections.
COMELEC is confident that the barangay and SK elections will finally push through on October after it was postponed 4 times.
Officials from the Commission on Elections have visited Sulu to encourage more voters to register for the barangay and SK elections amid the low turnout of registrants.
Upang makita rin yung kalagayan ng ating mga kababayan habang sila ay nagpaparehistro o habang sila ay pumupunta sa opisina ng COMELEC upang kami naman dyan sa main office ay mapag-desisyon na namin kung ano ang tamang magagawa upang mas maiangat natin ang antas ng serbisyo publiko.
Welcome back to the Chiefs. It's a go for the Barangay and Sangguniang Kabataan elections in October. That's 5 years after the last one in May 2018. How are preparations going? Let's ask COMELEC spokesperson Rex Laudianco. Good evening, sir, and welcome to the Chiefs.
Evening, Attorney.
Good evening, Ma'am Amy. Good evening, Ma'am Lucy. Magandang gabi po sa lahat ng ating gasubaybay sa The Chiefs.
Magandang gabi, sir. Sir, kumusta ang preparations? Pero more than the preparations for the actual voting, no? How are you going to get people to go out and vote on Barangay Elections Day when, we expect that after 5 years, baka wala na silang kakilalang kandidato. They don't even know who to vote, what to vote for, what the rules are, and so on and so forth. How are we in terms of preparing, not just for the actual process, but preparing the electorate for it?
So for the first phase of preparations, ma'am, at this time, we're at the registration phase of the elections. So sabi nga po namin, Chairman Garcia, starting on December 12, 2022, practically, COMELEC has opened not only its doors, but also its windows sa lahat po ng ating mga kababayan. We started with the overseas registration in December 9 of 2022. 92 posts worldwide opened its registration for overseas voting. Dito naman po sa atin for local registration, it started in December 12. And we also pioneered the Register Anywhere project in 5 malls in NCR, 3 malls outside of NCR, but we also went to 1 university, several offices, and today po, we even launched it in DSWD. Not only that po, we are conducting scheduled conduct of satellite registrations in the barangays themselves. So kami na po, COMELEC na ang pumupunta sa kada barangay. We also set up mall registrations. We admit, maliliit po ang tanggapan ng COMELEC. Walang maayos sa pipilahan, sisulungan sa init, sa araw, sa ulan. Kaya po kapag may mall sa lugar, nakikipag-partner na po kami. Yan na po ang ginagawa namin. At meron din po kaming special registrations. Nagkakandak po noong last January 9, nationwide, the COMELEC launched its Voters Education Campaign. Ang maganda po dito sa campaign na to, it is coupled with special registration. For the SK, also in barangay po, voters natin, lahat po ng mga mag-aaral sa junior at senior high na recipients ng Voters Education, we assure them, in the afternoon, we will be conducting special registration. So pag uwi po nila sa hapon, hindi lang sila nakapag-voters ed, nakarehistro pa sila. Naidamay po namin yung teaching and non-teaching staff nila. At kung yung mga kamag-anak po nila present sa school na yon, hindi na po namin tinatanggihan. Sama na po lahat. So after this registration phase, we will be going into the preparations of the project of precincts and ultimately going into the voters education and voters information campaign towards election. So ito po yung magkakasunod na hakbang na ginagawa ng COMELEC papunta sa October 30, 2023 BSKE.
So how has the turnout been in terms of the registration? Kasi meron kaming news report recently na medyo mababa raw ang turnout, no? Wala masyadong nagpaparegister. Paano yung hihimukin ang mga, lalo na ang kabataan, no, na bumoto? Sino bang hindi masipag mag-register? Matanda o bata?
Actually, Ma'am Luching, mas masigasig po magrehistro yung ating mga kabataan for their SK. May excited po sila, no? Admittedly, ma'am, since December 12, mababa po talaga ang voter turnout. In fact, si Chairman Garcia, nabanggit niya nilalangaw yung aming opisina for the whole of December. In fact, including the first week of January. But we see a pickup na po in the face, no? Nakita na rin po namin yung Register Anywhere project namin nung una, hindi masyadong pinapansin. Nung nakita nila yung value, na kahit pala nandito sila sa NCR, be it nagtatrabaho, nakatira pansamantala, nagbabakasyon, nag-aaral. Pero they wanted to go and vote doon po sa kanilang mga provinces. Pwede po pala sila doon. So they flocked to the Register Anywhere sites. Sa ngayon po, ang status natin as of last Saturday, we had already processed 1 million plus application. And out of that 1 million plus applications, almost 930,000 po dyan ang new voters. To include all the other reactivation, yung pong mga na-deactivate for not having voted twice, kasama na po sila. Practically bago po yan, natanggal sila sa listahan, but now we're including them back. Umaabot na po tayo sa 1,025,000. So ma'am, we breached the first minimum target, 1 million. Alam niyo naman po kami sa COMELEC, kung ito yung minimum target namin, we're hoping for the last days, maabot pa namin yung second minimum target, and that's 1.5 million new voters po.
Medyo mababa pa rin yan, attorney? Meron ba kayong informal study being conducted para makita kung ano yung mga dahilan why people might not be so interested in participating dito sa barangay and sangguniang kabataan vote?
Naku, Ma'am Ami, ganito po. Kung mapapansin po natin compared doon sa registration na naganap noong July 4 to July 23, 2022, it's a mere 2 days lang po ito. But it is immediately after the May 9, 2022 elections, mataas pa po yung election fervor. In fact po yung 18 days na yon, naka 2 million plus registrants po kami, bagong registrants. All in all, 3 million plus. So ngayon po na medyo malayo na doon sa season ng halalan at merong uncertainty, ma'am. There's really an uncertainty dahil hanggang ngayon po, bagamat hindi pa naman po na-struck down ng Supreme Court yung Republic Act 11935. But there is a point of uncertainty na nakabinbin pa po kasi sa Supreme Court. We do not know yet kung papayagan if the Supreme Court will declare Republic Act 11935 as constitutional, na tuloy tayo sa October 30 para sa BSK, or isa-set na Supreme Court na mas maagang halalan. In that case po, yun nga po yung paalala namin, kung maaga po talaga ang ating halalan for the BSKE as will be declared by the Supreme Court, kung sakali man, wala na po talaga tayong inaasahan pa na extension dahil papasok na po tayo sa period ng prohibition ng registration, creation of new precincts, or alteration of the other precincts.
So nakaka-apekto talaga yung uncertainty, na baka ma-postpone na naman o baka matutuloy ba yung ng mga tao, di ba? O mapaaga. Well, before that, you were saying, you were warning, bago yan ma-extend, you were warning, pag na-extend, ito madadagdag sa gastos ninyo. From 4 to another 10 billion, ano? 8 to 4 to 10 billion yung estimate eh. At this point, sa ganyang registration, mga magkano na yung madadagdag kung sakasakaling matuloy as scheduled in October at ganyan yung registration?
Base po dun sa nakaraang funding po namin, kung natuloy po sana yung December 5, 2022 elections natin, ang pondo po ng COMELEC doon ay 8.4 billion pesos. Now, coming into this year na na-postpone nga po, alam naman po ng Kongreso at Senado na magre-registration kami, lalaki ang voters base, dinagdagan po nila kami ng around 2.5 to 2.7 billion pesos. Ito po ay on the assumption na hindi ganun kalaki ang magpaparehistro. Pero kung makikita po natin, ito po, inaasahan na po natin ito, yung Filipino mentality on the last day. Kung bubuhos po talagang ating kababayan na magiging napakarami po ng new registrants, mapipilitan po kaming magdagdag ng presinto. Pag nagdagdag ka ng presinto, magdadagdag po tayo ng electoral boards, dagdag na teachers. Mukhang mapupunta po kami sa paghingi ng karagdagang pondo. Ang kagandahan naman po doon sa ang kagandahan naman po doon sa Republic Act 1195, sabi naman po doon na yung pondo sa gagamitin sa ni-reset o ni-reschedule na elections ay either kukunin sa General Appropriations Act or additional or supplemental. So maari naman pong pahintulutan kami ng Kongreso na humingi ng karagdagang pondo.
Paano pag napaaga nga? Pwede bang ang maging decision ay May? Kasi di ba dapat naman talaga May yan. Is it possible that the Supreme Court might decide in favor of May elections?
Anything is possible po at this time, Ma'am Lucy. Remember po, during the oral arguments, we were asked, kung hindi man October ang magiging halalan, hindi man December, what is the earliest time na makapagkoconduct kami ng elections given everything, prepared na lahat? Ang sinabi po ng COMELEC through Chairman Garcia, it's not late, not earlier than May. So it could be May, it could be April, it could be October. We do not know yet. Kung sakali man pong mapaaga, ma'am, then we will have to make do with what we have. That's 8.4 plus 2.5. That's it. Ang mahihirapan lang po dito talaga, ma'am, ngayon po kasi we're trying to maintain a 400 voter per precinct. Kasi manual po ito, ma'am. Susulat po natin yung kandidatong iboboto natin. So medyo matagal po.
Oo nga,
ang problema po, opo, kung kakapusin po kami ng pondo, Ma'am Lucy, Ma'am Ami, mapipilitan kami i-compress po 600 voters per precinct. Yun po yung medyo magpapabagal po sa atin. Kaya nga po hanggat maaari sana, kami po kung sakali man lalaki talaga ang botante natin, hihingi po kami ng karagdagang pondo para lang po ma-maintain natin yung 400 voters per precinct po.
Ngayon na na-bring up mo yung process, paki-refresh mo nga memory namin pagdating sa barangay and SK elections. Meron bang kodigo yan? Malalaman ba nila kung ano yung mga pangalan ng mga dapat nilang isulat dahil hindi yan sinashade lang, di ba? Isusulat mo. Paki-explain mo sa amin ulit ang voting process for barangay and SK.
Tama po, Ma'am Lucy. Ito po ay manual elections po tayo pagdating sa barangay and SK elections. Bakit po manual? Wala naman po kasi kailangan transmission. Yung pong ating ipoboto sa barangay, siya na rin pong bibilangin doon. And ultimately, doon sa Barangay Board of Canvassers, doon na rin po sila ipoproklama. Hindi na po akit sa munisipyo, probinsya at sa national board. Kaya po manual tayo. Yung po sa pagboto natin ng mga list of candidates, ipapaskill po namin yan. Doon po mismo sa ballot secrecy folder. So doon sa uupuan po ninyo sa ating mga paaralan na gagawin naming polling place at voting centers, makakaasa po kayo na meron po diyang certified list of candidates. Bukod po dito, bago po maghalalan, kami po ay magpapadala sa bawat botante po natin ng voters information sheet. Ano po ang nakalagay sa voters information sheet? Nandun po kung saan presinto po kayo boboto, kung saan po doon kayo pupuntang paaralan at higit po sa lahat yung mga kandidato po sa barangay ninyo. So ito po yung efforts namin para makasiguro na alam nyo po kung sino yung pagpipilian yung botante. Bukod pa po ito, of course, doon sa pangangampanya mismo sa barangay ninyo, mga 10 days lang po yan dahil barangay lang naman po, no? 10 days campaign period na gagawin nila within your respective barangays po.
Corny, cambio lang ako yung National Privacy Commission absolved the COMELEC of data privacy violations noong 2022 elections. Pero hanggang ngayon, alam ko, attorney, may mga nag-aalala pa rin ng privacy nila. Anong masasabi niyo doon? And how do you address these concerns of the people?
Thank you so much, ma'am, sa first opportunity po na to. Una po sa lahat, napatunayan po. Kasi kung titignan niyo po, yung complainant po mismo dyan sa case na yan is the NPC itself. It's the Criminal Investigation Division of the NPC itself. So sila po mismo ang nag-complain, sila po mismo ang nag-imbestiga at napatunayan po na walang naganap na breach. Why? Wala pong servers ng COMELEC ang naka-online. It's a standalone server, secure inside, a configuration room na wala nakaka-access. Kahit po kami, kahit po si Chairman Garcia, hindi basta-basta po nakaka-access doon at everything is logged. May 24/7 na CCTV po dyan. Pangalawa, yung pong lumalabas po na access po, no, unauthorized access nung tao na na-involved dito, hindi po server ni COMELEC, it's Smartmatic server. Yung isa pong second phase, so bakit kami na-absuelto pa? Kasi wala pong concealment na naganap. So immediately after having knowledge of the alleged security breach, ipinaalam po namin kagad sa NPC and we cooperated there. Pangalawa, pangatlo po, yung data na nakuha kasi, it's actually wala pong violation ng data privacy. These are test names, test data. Wala pong actual election data. So ulitin ko po, wala po kaming naka-online na data. Yung website po na yan, it's a standalone website. Wala pong information dyan ng tungkol sa ating botante. At napakahigpit po ng aming data privacy management policies. Ito pong data privacy management policies, these are lessons learned dun po sa dumabas na hacking na rin po sa COMELEC dati. So mula po noon, natutong COMELEC, may sarili kaming data privacy management policies approved by NPC. And right now po, Ma'am Lucy, Ma'am Ami, we're training our own experts for cybersecurity. Magtatayo po ang COMELEC ng aming cybersecurity division under the leadership of Chairman Garcia. So ilan lamang po ito sa mga hardening at mga hakbang na ginagawa natin to ensure that our data
Di ba
are
yung
safe.
magiging redundant sa ibang cybersecurity units ng ibang, in fact, law enforcement agencies have
Meron yun sila.
units.
Yeah.
That is correct po. Ito pong cybersecurity division namin, they will specialize on election data po. And yung pag-create po namin dito, these are under practically the tutelage of DICT, DOST, nakikipag-partner po kami. So ito po is sharing of experiences. In fact po, nung ginawa po natin ang halalan, Ma'am Lucy, Ma'am Ami, no, we have experienced attempts, more than 30,000 attempts every day in hacking. But COMELEC with DICT and DOST were able to repel all of this. So napahalagahan po, napaproteksyonan ng DICT, DOST, pinagsama po ng COMELEC yung aming mga data po at wala po talagang hacking na naganap po.
Okay, what about yung mga teachers na lagi nagsisilbi pag election, no? Yung bang mga matagal nang humihingi rin ng additional budget yung mga yan, di ba? Yung honoraria nila. Na-factor in nyo rin ba yan?
Ma'am, in fact, during the Senate and congressional debates last year for the General Appropriations Act po sa budget hearings, COMELEC po ang nanguna sa pakikipaglaban for one. Kung kaya po namin, humingi kami ng increase ng budget para po ma-increase namin yung honoraria nila. Ganun po talaga pinaglalaban namin. Kasi ang rule of the thumb po, pag mayroong budget sa eleksyon, 60% or more of that will go to the honoraria of the election poll workers. Doon po yan. Ganun po yung rule of the thumb yan. So nung una po kami dumulog sa Kongreso, ito po yung sinasabi namin, gusto naming taasan yung honoraria ng teachers po natin. Kasi as it stands now, kapag manual elections po at 400 registered voters per precinct, ang kanila pong honoraria ay 6,000, 5,000, and 4,000 respectively. Gusto po sana namin itaas. Unfortunately, hindi po naibigay sa amin ng pamahalaan itong hinihingi po namin. So second action po kami. Ang hinihiling na po sana namin kahit konting dagdag lang, ma-absorb na lang ni COMELEC po yung tax po. Dahil kung matatandaan po natin, beginning from July last year, opo, na na-veto po ng ating Pangulo yung tax exemption sana. So yun na lang din po yung hinahabol namin. Kami na magsa-shoulder ng tax para po maneto nila ng buo yung kanilang honoraria. Unfortunately, again, hindi po kami napagbigyan dun sa karagdagang po. Naiintindihan naman po natin ang Senado, ang Kongreso at Executive na talaga po medyo coming from a pandemic, medyo kulang po talaga yung ating pondo.
Okay, while we still have time, Attorney Rex, anong pwede ninyong sabihin to assure, well, the citizenry, especially the young, that barangay politics, okay, and barangay governance is still relevant in this day and age, no? And that those who will run for positions within the barangay will not simply take advantage of it by learning how to do politics in the negative sense that it's been practiced by so many for years and years, no? Paano nyo ibebenta yung notion ng why barangay governance is still relevant and important to the Filipinos of this time?
Coming from yung nabanggit ko nga po na nationwide voters education po namin, tingin ko hindi po kami mahihirapan na ibenta yung barangay at SK elections po. Why po? Nung po kami nagkakandak ng voter set, tinatanong po namin sila, meron pong module doon tungkol sa barangay. Para saan? Nakikita po namin yung mga estudyante, alam nila kung ano yung health center, alam nila kung sino si barangay secretary, ano yung duties ng barangay captain, yung mga medicals at social workers dun sa barangay. So, what does this mean to us? Nung tinatanong po namin sila, bakit nila alam yung mga bagay na ito? Ang sabi po nila, kasi daw po nung pandemic, ramdam nila ang presensya ng gobyerno through their barangays. So nakita po namin ngayon, nakikita ng kabataan, nakita ng mga mamamayan natin how important it is to have good governance in barangay. So ang kagandahan po nun, when we started with the module ng what is barangay, what is SK, ang kasunod na po niyan, kasi dapat ang kasunod na po sa module namin dyan, yung mga attributes ng good leaders. Yung pong mga ideas ng good leaders, magkakasunod po yan sa amin hanggang sa dumating sa punto ng last module namin, tamang informasyon, tamang desisyon, tamang pagboto. Practically, siguro po sabihin na natin, pandemic taught us a lot. Nakita na po natin ang ayuda dumaan sa barangay. Ang health services dumaan sa barangay. Even the quarantine phase, pagtakbo sa ospital, pagdala ng gamot, pagdala ng pagkain, all of this were trickled down through the barangays. At naramdaman po ng mga kabataan natin ito. So that's why we are really hopeful, we're really confident na magiging maganda po ang turnout natin sa barangay dahil nakita na po ng lahat how important barangay governance is po. Good governance.
All right. Attorney Rex Laudianco, COMELEC spokesperson, maraming salamat po sa inyo.
Thank you, Attorney.
Magandang gabi po. Mabuhay po kayo, mabuhay po ang Pilipinas.
Thank you. And that's it for the Chiefs. We hope what was discussed here will keep the conversation going. I'm Lucy Cruz Valdez.
I'm Mami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.